In modern history, there have been dire predictions made about the imminent demise of the food chain, or the global cooling, or global warming, or CO2 levels rising, or the polar caps melting and we're all going to be flooded. And if you look at history, these have never panned out. There's a lot of reasons for that, one of which is the obvious, that the people who are making the predictions are skewing the data for ulterior motives, whether it be financial or political. A lot of people who have a socialist mindset have moved into the environmental movement and are using that, the fear-mongering of imminent demise, to promote socialist agendas. So these predictions do not come about for that reason, that the data is skewed. But there's another reason too, is that a lot of people are ignorant of the energetic forces that God has placed in the earth to heal itself in case of trouble that comes. For example, you think of a forest fire, and people who monitor forests, they say that after a forest fire, the earth just springs alive again, really rapidly growing. And there's a lot of reasons for it, one of which is a release of nitrogen or potash, also potassium from the trees. There's also the release of carbon dioxide, which plants just love carbon dioxide, and that increases after a forest fire. But there's another energetic force at play that a lot of people don't know about, and I just recently discovered it myself. And it goes like this. If there's a tree here, and this is burned in a fire, it's charred, it's got carbon on the outside of it, and it falls over, and it is close then to the anion charge of the earth, something very wonderful and mysterious happens. There is a collector field that forms between the carbon and the anion charge of the earth. And it almost seems, when I first discovered this, it was how would you say? It seemed like I was looking at a UFO technology, because this collector field formed, and it, in my mind I could just hear it going wow, 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 and it spreads out in a wide berth around, and it goes down into the earth, and it starts collecting together anions into that charred wood. And out of this comes a spray of anions out the top, but they do not dissipate into a spray. There's actually a collector field that forms around them and carries them out and to a target. And what happens then is this collector field, this containment field, takes that anion charge and the other healing energies that are in it and targets another tree. It will actually go looking for what I call a target match, a genetic equivalent. A poplar tree will go looking for another poplar tree. An oak tree will go looking for another oak tree to deliver this healing energy into. A pine tree will go looking for another pine tree. If it is a rabbit that fell during the fire, and the charred remains of that rabbit, the same thing occurs in that carbon. The collector field will form, the distributor field will come out, and it will go looking for another rabbit to distribute that healing energy into. And I guess this is to maintain an equilibrium, a balance, that to try to maintain the same amount of pines, the same amount of poplars, the same amount of rabbits. I assume that that's why it does this. But it will go looking for another rabbit to distribute that healing energy into. And if the closest rabbit is hundreds of miles away, it will find it, and it will deliver that to it. Now, if it cannot find a genetic match, a target match nearby, or anything to distribute it to, it will then go looking for a cation charge. Now, a cation charge forms when something is sick or injured. Like a deer. Let's say a deer was hurt, has a wounded leg during the forest fire, got a wounded leg. This thing will send that healing power into that wounded leg, to that cation charge. and it will send that in to help heal the deer or heal whatever animal needs it. So first it will go looking for a genetic match, and then it will go looking for a cation charge, in that order. But there's some fascinating rules that govern how this thing operates. Now let's say, for example, that this is first thing is, if this falls on the ground, the distributor or the collector field forms perpendicular to the source of the anion charge. So it spreads out across the ground. Like if this is a hill and this falls on the side of a hill, the collector field does not go out according to gravity. Otherwise it would spread out over an empty space, or spread out over a valley or a ravine. Instead it goes perpendicular to the source, so it would go up and down the hill to get the anion charge out of the ground and into the air. The next thing is that if this thing, let's say that this is a poplar tree and that's a poplar tree, and this thing forms and it starts firing into this. As long as this thing is firing into this, this will not fire. This will be the doctor, this will be the patient. And let's say that this thing falls into a little bit of a ravine to where it is actually lower than the collector field of this tree. So now it's down into the collector field. What happens then is instantly the entire apparatus will shut down. This thing that's the collector field is going wah wah wah, will go wah, and the distributor field will go pew. It'll shut itself off, and it will sit there and watch the patient, and the patient will watch the doctor. This will never fire, that will never fire. And as long as nothing changes, they will sit there for eternity watching each other. But if something happens, like a leaf blows from another tree onto here, suddenly the genetic match changes, because there is genetics from another tree, and it will abandon this as a patient and will go fire to something that has a closer target match, something more of a genetic equivalent. And when it fires off to another target, this will then activate and it will find a target to shoot to, unless of course it gets picked on by another one. But they will sit and they will watch each other. Or if a blade of grass grows over this one, then the genetics will change and it will go looking for a different target. Also, if another piece of something that is either targeting something else or being targeted to where there's communication, if this falls near this, and if there's an anion spray coming out of this or going into this, this thing will abandon this as a target, because it assumes that because of the anion spray that is so close to it that it doesn't need to target it anymore. This area will be off limits to it because there's an anion charge rising out of it, and so it will go looking for another target. So this is really, really fascinating, but this is one of the reasons that after a fire things snap back so fast, is because every piece of carbon on the ground becomes either a target or targets something else with the healing power of the earth, and the healing power of the earth is taken out and distributed to the plants that need recovering or to the animals that need recovering. Now, this also applies if you have loggers go through a forest and they start chopping the trees down. Every time you get one of those stumps chopped off, the energetic forces of the earth will form the same way. The collector field will form, wah, 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 and the distributor field, and it will start looking for something of a genetic match to deliver the healing powers of the earth into. So you think about a clear-cut forest, all those stumps, every one of those stumps out there where it looks so ugly is actually a power distributor. The energy of the earth is flying out of there, and they're looking for sprouts to deliver healing energy into, and the forest will snap back because of this. Now let's talk about another terminology: anions and cations. Here's a battery, here's the negative end, here's the positive end. The ions that radiate out the bottom, the negative end, are called anions. The ions that radiate out the positive end are called cations. Now, the way to remember this is that anions stands for a negative ion, and a cation coming out this end. Cation, think of a cat, and a cat has paws, and a cation has a positive charge. I know it's corny, but you'll never forget it. And the charges in an atom are determined by the ratio of electrons to protons, because if you remember from science, here's your electron, and in the core of it there's a proton and a neutron. Neutron having no charge, the proton having a positive charge, and then the electrons circling around that have negative charges to them. If they have more electrons than they have protons, then the atom has a negative charge. It is an anion. If they have more protons than they have electrons, then it's a cation, has a positive charge to it. Now, what we are wanting is more anions, because a man is made from the dust of the earth. The earth has a negative charge to it, and the negative charge is what's healthier for the body. The more sick a person gets, the more damaged the cells are, the more cation charges build up. Also, acidity has a cation charge to it. So we are shooting for the anions. So we have anions, negative charge, cations, positive charge. Now, let me talk about the testing measurements. I recommend, if you have not seen it yet, my video on pendulum science, but I'm going to review just quickly how this works. If you hold a laser pointer out, point it at a wall, or if you just point your finger like this, you will notice, let's see, I'm going to reposition myself so my arm is straight out. You will notice a little bit of movement, because the arm and the hands do not remain perfectly still. There's jerking, there's inconsistent movements, even on the hand that's holding the camera. And what this is as the brain is sending signals down the arm, firing through the synapse and the muscles, it's not consistent. You don't get a steady movement. There's a little bit of jerking, a little bit of inconsistency about it. And if you were to hold a laser pointer against the wall, you would notice that some of the movements have a little bit of a left-hand curve to them. Some of them will have right-hand curves to them. Some will be straight, but we can ignore those for now. And what we want to notice is, if you mapped it out, you would see that the left-hand movements are about the same as the right-hand movements as far as the random movements of the arm. But if you have a healthy body, which I discussed in the video about pendulum science, you're eating organics, you're doing body cleansing, you're staying away from pop and acid foods, then the macro signal in the body, the macro ion signal, which radiates about 6 inches from the fingers, about 3 inches from the toes, and about 1/2 inch, 3 inches from the toes and the spine, and about 1/2 inch from the rest of the body. That macro signal, when it comes in contact or close proximity to something the body wants, it will send a favorable signal through the body. And that favorable signal, as it spirals down the arm, will cause a change in the ratio of right to left-hand movements that of the jerking of the arm. And so, if you hold a pendulum down, the pendulum, like a little seismograph, will tell you if there's any right-hand or left-hand movements in the shaking of the arm. It will show up in the pendulum. Or if the body is unfavorable, it will actually send the pendulum moving the other way. There's nothing magical about the pendulum. The pendulum is just showing that there is actually ion field interfacing with the synapse of the arm. It is with this, using the pendulum test, that I was able to determine and have been able to track my own mineral imbalances and that of others, helping them with their health, also helping children with their allergies, because the body the ion signal that goes through the body radiating out. If I took a child by the hand, if I took a child by the left hand, the right hand, I can hold it over a product that they're eating or that's in their house, and it will move according to that child's reaction, ion reaction to that product, because the ion signal runs to the far ends of the body. And being in range of that child, the signal will actually pass through and treat the child as if that child is part of my own body. And so we've been using this to help people with allergies, to help people with mineral imbalances, to help people try to balance themselves out, vitamin deficiencies, those sorts of things. And a friend of mine who has come even to have me help him with his health, and he knows I get into a lot of different weird sciences and stuff. He asked me one day, he said, have you ever heard or studied anything about Organite? I told him I didn't know what kind of a rock that was. He said, oh, no, it's not a rock. It's a device that people are making and making all kinds of claims about it. I said, I haven't heard anything about it. And he said that he had ordered a Organite disc, and this is what he had ordered. I think he paid like $20 for it and asked me to check it out. Now, the pendulum also helps for indicating ion fields. It picks up ion fields very, very easily, especially if a person is deficient in anions or cations. And I ran this thing through every test that I could, and I told them all I'm getting off of this, and this is metals with a crystal in there, I'm getting anions and cations out of here. And we discovered that what is happening is the metals are acting like an EMF receiver, and the crystals acting like a transmitter, sending out cations one way and anions out the other way. And then I started looking online about the internet, about the Organite devices that people were making. They were also incorporating coils into their devices. Let me set down this napkin here. We'll put the coil on top of that so you can see it. So anyhow, then I started testing the coils to see what kind of production is coming out of those. And to my surprise, the coils, and I won't show it now because I'm ion neutral, the coils themselves, I tested out the shapes and the sizes that people were making and found out that the coils with a 1/4-inch spacing that spiral off clockwise, anions were coming out of here, and if it spirals off counterclockwise, cations are coming out of here. Apparently the EMF somehow in here, this will separate out the ions out of the EMF. So I put out an Organite alert online and did several videos about the coils, because a lot of people were pointing this coil toward the people who were sitting by the device, which is not anything you want. You don't want cations going into you. You want the anions going into you. Okay, the next thing that I checked then was I made myself I just call it a power puck. First I made these out of iron and resin and found out that that I had done that wrong, and what I needed to do was to make it out of carbon and resin in order to get Organite. And so I went to the car parts store and got that's where I got the metal filings from, where they're turning rotors. It's cast iron, but it's shavings is what it is. It's free. They throw it away. Picked up several buckets of that. Picked up royal oak charcoal and ground it up in a grinder. Mixed it with the resin. Poured it into a muffin pan. And I'd also put a coil in there, trying to get it to produce better. But because of the metal in the device, it ground out the coil, so the coil was not generating. But this is my first experience with a device with the carbon in it. See, this one here did not have any carbon, so there was no organ going to be produced by it, no matter what anybody claimed. They call this a tower buster. It's supposed to help defer bad energies around cell towers. But anyhow, so I had this cone, and I took it with me on the road, trying to figure out, how I can measure it, how I can determine whether it has orgone in it or not. And by holding my hand on it if I held my hand on the top of it, it kind of gave a happy feeling. If I held my hand on the bottom of it, it kind of gave a sad feeling. It was kind of odd, and there was no pendulum reading over it. I couldn't get this to react to it at all. And so I could tell that there was like a latent energy in it, and trying to figure out how to get it out. And so as I was driving down the road one day, I held it up to the driver's side window, past the side window, and I could feel energy starting to radiate from it. And I thought, this is interesting. And then I remembered that with zero-point energy tends to follow moving objects. And so I thought, well, maybe I can get more out of this if I put energy into it. And so the first thing that I did was I held up a battery to it, and to my surprise, the thing came alive. I got powerful field readings off of this. There it is, right there. And I was really surprised, but I had nothing to work with as far as knowing what I was looking at. So I started running it through every test that I knew of. And one of the things that I discovered with it, and let me show you how I discovered it. I took one of the coils because I knew that one side would produce anions out, one side would produce cations out. So I set this on top of it. And to my surprise, what happened was there was a powerful positive energy that was coming out of it. But it was odd because the shape of the energy actually made a dome over here. And then it would come out of the dome. It's actually about 1 foot to 2 foot, depending upon what material I'm using. And out of the dome would come about a 10-inch wide band of energy, and that read very, very positive to the coil. And then it was interesting because if I set the cone this way, the dome did not appear. Instead, a tight band of anions would come out of here. And what I discovered was that carbon, and let me show you pure carbon. This is some of the tests that I did. This is some of the Royal Oak charcoal. Royal Oak charcoal, having any charcoal or carbon having anions going through it, will generate these fields. Very, very, very powerful fields. And what I discovered was that the dome that was appearing on here was not actually a good thing. It was actually a negative thing because the cations were being driven down into it while the anions were trying to rise out of it. What I found that these devices, if they have carbon in them and you drive anions into them or set them on the ground near an anion charge, that a collector field radiates out the base of this and straight out the sides of the base and down about, this one here will probably go down about 2 feet, but it just goes on and on and on out to the sides, and it collects anions into it and they radiate out the top. Now when I had this on top of it, the cations are being driven down into it while the anions are trying to come up, and the dome that I saw was actually a dome of confusion. It was like a traffic jam. Cations trying to go down, anions trying to come up, and this dome was created as they're trying to organize the traffic flow. And the ribbon that came off of it was a wide and basically unhealthy ribbon. So these things do not like, if you have carbon in these, they do not like cations being driven through them. So if you have a coil, the coil has to be on the bottom side of it. So if you get a pennant, if you order a pennant online and it has a black material that might be carbon in it and a coil next to it, you want the coil to be spinning off counterclockwise, and you want to have this way, so the coil is away from you. So if the cations coming off of it go away from you, the anions are driven through the material into your body. So if you have a pennant, that's how it should be. You do not want to have a pennant with any counterclockwise coil facing into you. This is not healthy. And now discovering this, that having this thing with this coil on it, finding out that the cations being driven down into it caused this traffic jam, I realized that one device that I had made was totally messed up. Let me show you my Frankenstein device. I did just about everything wrong that could be done wrong in a coil. I poured this into the bottom of an ice cream bucket. First I poured in clear resin, and when I thought it had set up enough, and there was actually a coil in the middle, when I thought it had set up enough, I poured in the resin with the carbon and the metal into it. But the clear resin apparently was not set up hard enough, and the coils slid, and one coil slid over and was touching these. And I know that coils touching each other will cancel each other out. So I went in from the top and actually pulled this out through the resin. But this is how the coils are situated in there. They are situated with the clockwise coming out, anions coming out, cations being driven down into this. And because of these coils and the cations going in, anions trying to come out, each one of these needs about 2 foot clearance to coordinate the traffic of the anions and cations, the congestion. Well, they don't have 2 feet. I mean, they've got barely 2 inches. And so what is happening with this is, out of this is coming this cone of confusion. It's not a cone, excuse me. It's like a fog. That there is no coordination in the distributor fields that are coming out here. Everything is all confused, and this fog just dissipates. It rises up and dissipates. So this is my Frankenstein device. I feel really guilty about it. Because once you see how these devices are supposed to work, and you see what a sick puppy this is, you realize there are wrong ways of doing this. And I feel so bad about this, I thought about destroying it, and I thought, well, maybe I ought to take it out near the closest cell tower to me and just buried it in the ground and let it do what it wants to do. So that's my little freak of nature there. And then I started testing out different shapes and different compositions. This here is actually the Royal Oak charcoal ground up in resin, because I wanted to see if it would generate better without the iron in it and just with pure charcoal, carbon in it. Because I'm finding that if I take the carbon and set it on the ground, it will generate the collector field out the bottom, the distributor field out the top. So I wanted to see if shapes would enhance that. And it did not by very much. And as I was trying to incorporate, what I was trying to do is trying to find the maximum output. Now that I was able to find out that there was a collector field that radiated out the bottom, and this is a very negative collector field, and a positive anions coming out the top with a guidance system. The distributor field is like a guidance system coming out the top. So I tried a shape like this to see if that would encourage to get more of that effect, and I was sorely disappointed. And this particular cone here, I've been using little things like this, little martini glasses, and poured the resin and the charcoal in there. And of course, you have to spray with oil first. And this is the bottom of a pie pan. But I did not get good production out of this device, so that was a wash. And then I made a device like this, and this is actually made out of a cup like this. There we go. And this is resin with a little bit of iron in it, but mostly it's all charcoal and resin in here. And I found out that this shape was better than that shape. It seemed to like this better. And I assume that it's because it's more the shape of the of a stump, the roots of a tree. It appeared to me. And then I tried. We were testing these, and we found out that the material that the cones and the devices are made of is actually showing up at the place where these are targeting. Because these do target. The first thing that they will do is they will go looking for the distributor field is actually guided, and the first thing that it's going to go looking for is a genetic similarity. And I can set this out, set it up a little bit above it, and this will target this. But what I was finding is the resins were showing up at the target. And being that I was looking to use these for medical purposes, I did not want these, I did not want to be injecting anybody with resins. So I found out that a lot of people are making these things out of cement. So I took the cones, I took the little thing, and I started producing cement. And this is Portland cement mixed half and half with sand. And these actually produced quite well. I was very impressed with them. But then I poured cement into this bugger and popped it out, and this is generating better than anything else that I have, even better than these big cones here, even better than, well, I don't know, I haven't compared it to that one. But this is generating, for its own shape and size, this is generating quite well. The other thing that was interesting was when I was testing these, I would notice when I was testing these devices that the collector field would go in the bottom, and it would start coming out the side right about here if it was heading toward a target. So I realized that there was a lot of material in here it did not need, that was unnecessary. So this is part of the reason why I went to this shape, is to get the base that it needs and a little bit of bump on it that it needs, and there is no extra material. I'm trying to get more bang for my buck, and this is actually producing quite well. The collector fields spread out the bottom, the distributor fields are coming out the top. So this has been my most productive shape. So I've been making a bunch of these. My wife said, you know, those look like boobs. And I suppose you could jokingly say I'm going to be giving, this is for in the spring, I'm planning on giving Mother Earth a boob job. I'm planning on burying these around to see if I can get these distributor fields out. And I'm actually testing it to see if I can actually create what's called a thin place. And we will have to find out how well that works. Now, please pardon me if my thoughts are a little bit random here, but that's kind of the way my mind works. Let me talk to you about shapes. This shape, this cone, this muffin tin, does not have enough of a taper to it to actually generate its own ion and cation field. But if a person puts it onto a coil, especially if the coil has the counter or the clockwise pointing up, the anions going through it will cause, and I'm going to give it a name, the organic targeting and tracking and restoration system. OTTRS, I'm going to call it. OTTRS, just so I don't keep calling it the field. OTTRS develops on this. And what I found with this is OTTRS, which is ubiquitous, it's all over in nature. What this is, and it occurs with only organic material, it does not occur with metals. Organic meaning having carbon in it, but with organic material, two fields form. First of all, there is the collector field that goes out, and I must tell you that when I first discovered the collector field, it scared me, because I had a puck set on its side, and I had a battery, and this puck will actually start to generate if that battery is within 10 inches of it. The collector field will radiate out. But I'm in my house, and this collector field goes sideways, perpendicular to the source of the anion charge. And it's spread, and it's very, very powerful, and reads very, very negative on the ion field testing. Very, very negative. And suddenly I realized I had this powerful negative force that was going through my house, basically splitting my house in half. I was afraid to even step into it, because this thing just freaks out when it gets into it. It's very, the word, well, negative, very, very harmful. The body just freaks. And the reason the body does not like it is this is a collector field. It pulls into itself anions and life energy and even other atoms and particles pulls into itself and then radiates them out the top. And the body likes the field coming out the top. It's anions. This will suck anions. This is a taking field. This collector field, it takes things away from you. It's like Robin Hood in the Sherwood Forest, stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. This is the part that steals. It'll steal energy out of you. It'll steal life out of you. It's very unhealthy. This part is very healthy. This is the part that gives to the poor. But the shapes, when you get into a shape like this, a pyramid or a cone, the shape themselves act as a crystal. Because when I went and tested jewelry, you take a diamond, for example, a diamond with a dome on the top and a tapered bottom. Cations come out the top, anions drive into the middle. Women would love this. Cations or anions, healthy ions, are actually driven into your finger when you're wearing a jewel that has this sort of a taper to it. Well, a cone like this acts like a diamond, acts like a jewel. Cations come out here, and I assume this is from the EMF. Cations come out here, anions come into here, and it generates on its own the anion flow. So this thing will self-generate. It does not need a coil. It does not need to be set on the earth. It will generate on its own. And even a larger coil like this. But the one thing that I noticed when I did the tracking of it, and interesting here, this cone here, I took it outside, set it on the ground, and I went out and I wanted to find the distance that the collector field radiates out. And it was only about 3 feet deep that it was going, but it radiated out, and I went walking. It was kind of funny because I set this down in a parking lot, walked, I thought maybe it'd go 50 feet, went beyond 50 feet, went beyond 100 feet, went beyond 200 feet. I actually was going cross streets and through parking lots and around cars, tracking the field that was radiating off the base of this. And when I got out 200 yards, in this heavy traffic, busy city, I decided, you know what, this thing just goes on a long, long ways. 200 yards in each direction at least, and it was still going at 200 yards. The field that started out 3 feet deep, it was down to about 2 feet wide, 2 feet deep. And this is the area where it is collecting anions, collecting life energy into it. It's a dark and very unhealthy energy. But the other thing that I found when I was tracking this in the parking lot was the collector field. It radiates out the bottom of this. As I got close to it, I noticed that there was another dome. And this was a dome of the negative energy. And this particular cone, the dome was 10 yards, 30 feet, as a perfect dome on the bottom of it. And I thought, wait a minute, what is this? And I remembered the dome that I had seen on top of the muffin cone, and it was the exact same thing. That this, because it is like a crystal, the EMF causes cations to radiate out the bottom. Well, there you've got another traffic jam. You've got the anions trying to be sucked into this thing, and the cations trying to come out of it, and you've got this traffic jam. So we've got this traffic jam that's occurring here that goes out 10 yards, and I did find out that in this collector field, if I hold this against myself, this will actually start sucking anions out of my body. But I wanted to know if I go on beyond the 3-foot mark, if I stand in the cone, the dome of the traffic jam, if I stood in there, would it also suck the anions out of my body? And it did not. It appears that as the collector field comes in with the anions and they back up into this traffic jam, that they've already got their anions with them. They don't need to collect anymore, so they're actually building up, and I could safely stand in that field. But if I approached and got within 2 to 3 feet of this, it would start sucking anions out of my body. Now, here is an interesting thing, though. A lot of people have cones or pyramids in their house, Organite devices, and they set them not on the floor, they set them on counters. They set them on nightstands. They set them on coffee tables. And so the collector field is actually radiating through the house. And if they have them set on a nightstand and they're laying down next to it or down into that field all night long, this thing's going to be sucking anions out of their body. So this is not healthy at all. And the other thing that we discovered is that the cones and the pyramids, as the collector field is sucking everything into it like a black hole, if there are particles or anions or atoms, it sucks those through also and sends them into the distributor field. And the material itself will end up at the target. Now, you could take a person who's laying down next to this all night long. They're going to have the anions sucked out of their body into this device, and it will fire up. And because they're into the collector field, it will not target them to be distributed to. But they stand up, they're anion deficient, they're high in cations, then this thing will pick them up as a target, and it will start distributing anions into them with the material that it's made of. So here you have somebody laying down, having the anions sucked out of them all night long, and then when they stand up, this thing starts depositing. If it's made of resin, it'll start depositing resin into them. So people thought it was bad enough that I had warned them about the coils, but here you also have a condition of the collector fields that radiate out. You don't want to be in that collector field. These things, cones and pyramids, need to either be on the ground, and if you live in an apartment, remember they radiate down 2 to 3 feet. So hopefully the person who's down in the below you is not a tall person, and so that they're down below that field. Or you can take these and preferably take these and place them flat against an outside wall. And the reason for this is that the electrical systems of a house, the electricity runs through the walls, and also the grounding wires run through the walls. Now, being that this is looking for anions, a good source, especially like in an apartment or a high-rise, is in the wiring, and the wiring is thickest in the walls, particularly the outside walls. So if you stick this flat against an outside wall, it can collect all at once, and there's no worry then about anybody being in the collector field unless they're walking through a door or sticking their head out a window, which usually people don't do for very long. It's a whole lot better than having this on a dresser or having it on a coffee table and having your lower parts and any pets you have in that collector field, because this will suck life out of you.